So our focus is on the chest and the ribs, and I want to work with that range of movement to help that area get some expansiveness by actually starting onto our backs on the bolster. So I want you to sit on the bolster center, take a block, place it so it's on its flat setting, so it's all the way down to the lowest setting. And then you're going to scoot forward so you're actually placing the sense of kind of your tailbone on that block. So when I lower back and I can feel that the block is part of my support, I'll see if I'm too close here. I'll make it. When I lower back my head to my blankets, you may find in the beginning of this whole rib creativity will change if we do a little bit of movement to start. So first, make sure that you're established on these kind of interesting prop positionals, right? They're trying to positionally lift up the rib cage. And then spread out the arms and see if you can actually work with this pattern of movement with the arms on the ground. So if you need the arms to flow out so that the elbows bend a little more, or that they're in more of a kind of a goalpost position, it might be kind of nice to play with how you access the symmetry in the arms so they're as even as they can, that you can tell when you're on your back. Now you're going to bend through the legs so that the feet get a feeling of pushing down. So kind of equally press down into both feet. The bone structure might feel one side, you might be on the side of the foot a little more, or, inside, outside where you push down. And so I want you to make your footprint, kind of imprint into your mat. And then once you imprint both feet pushing down as well as you can, your hips are still centered on the block. You're not trying to lift your hips up. In fact, you're actually trying to let the hip bones settle down. Okay, now you have the arch in the spine. Lift up the right foot off the ground and then get a feel of moving that knee towards your chest. Okay, and the bone structure will probably feel like, oh, now you have this right backside of a leg from the spine into the hip lifting, and then lower it back down. And I want you to alternate, of course, to the other side, but start to get a movement pattern, alternating the lift of the leg, but the feeling of kind of the scooping action of the leg lifting and moving in towards ideally towards your chest, although I know you're not going to touch the chest actually with the leg. But this way that you're working with this kind of curling pattern, just to warm up the back area before we focus primarily on the ribs and the breathing experience. And maybe your breath is a little shallow to start here. So experiment with the inhale when the leg comes in, or the inhale when the leg lowers down. A little bit more freedom to start with the breath. And then as we do a few more of these on each side, you want to keep that curling action of the back so that your hip flexor doesn't get so much fatigue at the very top of the thigh. Sometimes that can tire out. Okay. Now let the legs stretch down, so both feet reach down, and then we take a sandbag and we place it across the thigh lids. Okay. That seems like a very specific lane, the thigh lids. And so the legs seem to be kind of close, right? So they're alongside each other like they are in the day, but you might put the feet a little bit apart. And then once they're apart, notice if you tend to flop out, if you tend to flop up with the feet. They're probably not flopping in as much as out, but feel the heels push and the feet flex. Kind of activate, and then feel if you can get the tops of the thighs to actually kind of spring into action as if they're, well, spring, okay, as if the thighs, the quadriceps, the top of the legs are kind of tightening up, right? So open out the arms, relaxing your head. If you want to go back with the blanket to 1, you can feel what that's like for your rib cage. And then eventually you let the feet find a regulating, just simple stillness. So they don't have to be forced to flex, but they've had that reminder. And some of that will kind of help remodel that bone shape in practice. But at this point, you want to let go so you can refine the breath. Okay, so feature that motion of the inhale filling the lungs. And exhale, letting go. Inhale deeply, abdomen moves with the breath. And as you exhale, empty out through the mouth. Now feel the shoulder blades and feel if you can actually motion them down the back. So they're lowering down versus pulling up kind of to the shoulders, right? Or towards the ears. And that motion is a little limited because of the floor. I mean, it's good to have a floor. It's a good prop. But if you can get a feeling of your palms open and the shoulder blades lowering down, you can have 1 or 2 blankets under your head. This is certainly one where you might have to figure that out for yourself. Okay, and the ribs lift. And then see if you can bring your feet towards the bottoms of the feet down and then into Badakanasana. So you could take your sandbag off. You can move your sandbag up to your rib cage. You decide. If it feels like, well, it's fine where it's at, it's not interfering with the progress of the position of the feet together, the soles of the feet together, the knees out, then you might stay to keep working with the hip range of motion with the sand there. But you might also enjoy having a sandbag just simply up to the rib intersection and exploring that movement of the rib cage with the breath. Give it a few moments. You can come back to 2 blankets if you decide that's a little bit more comfortable for you. Feel the comfort, the comfortable aspects of the position to help you open up and expand through the chest, the breathing muscles, the intercostals. Okay, now the feet together might feel the inside line of the foot is not touching, the big toe line. That might be relaxed. And that would be preferred. So really our focal point is that the feet are just touching. They don't have to touch and press into each other completely. So feel how that touching layer is with the feet, and the knees outwards stretches the inner thighs. Okay, so now if you have sand on the lower waist area, you're going to slide that up a little higher to the ribs. And we'll all meet with the knees pointing up, the knees standing up a little bit, and then the feet scooting in towards the seat. And we're beginning to lift into a full inversion. Okay, so I want you to kind of layer the focus for the diaphragm, for the breathing muscle. And we're going to remove the Sand-Aid. And I like to move my block on this one usually, but I've been trying to play with just leaving it there and just see if it's really a distraction at all. So I'm going to do that today, is just leave my block. So you're going to walk your feet in so that the knees kind of perk up a little further. I think going down to 1 blanket will be ideal for your neck and your spine. And then you'll be a little cautious how much you push your bolster down. I want you to move it just a little bit down to the back of your pelvis. So as minimal as you can, so it just fits where you still have the lumbar spine primarily helped and lifted up. But as you lift up your feet and you let the knees wiggle a little side to side to feel that suspended lift of the hips, right from the bolster. So kind of measure the focus, even close your eyes and just kind of feel your hips lifted. And if you can check that box of reality, that's good. That's the focus, is the hips are up. Hips are us. So layer the spine, focus to feeling that arch, and then get a belt. And I want you to place the belt so that we're going to be doing 2 layers of inversions today as far as legs up, one here and then one at the end. So this layer will be, I put my feet into the belt or the belt up to my feet, and then I stretch the legs outwards. So your measurement of the width of the loop is completely up to you. So if you take the feet out when you're upside down and you notice that the legs are really shaky, then you probably need the belt closer in, the smaller loop. Okay, a little bit smaller approach to it. If you find that you go to more of a wide angle and your knees feel pressure, then it's too wide. So get a feel that the knee bones, you can tap onto them, the patellas with your hand, and they're facing, towards the back of your mat. They're not turning in, they're not turning out excessively. That simply allows you to flush through the lymph here in the inner thighs. Stretch the arms back overhead, so you can either have them individually reaching. You could use a block between the hands so that you're really prim and proper with the alignment. I don't mind just letting the arms move straight back, the palms open. It's kind of nice with a blanket, actually, to have that behind you. It gives you just a little bit of cushion. And then the arms can kind of remodel the movement in the bones. Relax the hands. Okay, spend a few moments here inverting the base of the body to benefit the upper, but also to benefit the organs. So you're resting the organs from gravity's downward pull. Good. Yeah, if you tend to push the feet a little farther back, be careful. You don't want to move them back over the chest. And then when you get the feel of your elbows maybe bending a little bit to conform to the time in the position, right? See if you can work with resetting that length of the arms back. Like they're going to soften. And then you're going to try to work on, just reach that right arm back, then the left arm back, and then settle. So every time you work the skin to lengthen, settle back into however the shape is unwinding. Take just a few more slow and deep breaths. Yeah, the feet are it's kind of a funny angle if you're flexing or if you're just letting them be natural. If you can call this natural with the belt, right? The activity for circulation. And now just feel how the legs sense this outward direction. They're moving open. So we're going to bend the knees and then reach up to the piece of belt that's closest to you. Slide the feet together. And I want us to try a little bit of a brain float today. And it's partially because of the leg kind of modeling of movement. So when we have that openness, it probably starts to set the skin, the fibers. You're working the opposite of slumping, even in the legs, the skin. So we're going to keep that idea. So I would take your loop, so it's very, very big loop, so it could reach towards the crown of your head. Maybe that's a little too much. But when you do get that length of the belt, remember it's one leg at a time. Okay, so you lower the left foot down. And then with that right leg into the belt, I want you to be careful the buckle is not behind your head. So slide it around. So as you reach, you're going to lift your head just a little bit to slide the belt behind it, well, on the head. And it's actually on the occiput. So you want to hold the brain, but not the brain stem with the belt. So I find that to be kind of interesting in observation, is it seems that that's sampled to kind of just feel what it's like with the belt low. But the idea would be that it's really not low on the brain. It's at the bulge at the shelf. And it kind of holds nicely there to support that traction in the neck. This is about always what you'll see for traction, is this is held and lifted. Okay, so add a sandbag if you'd like. If you prefer to have this left knee bending, bottom of the foot down, and that seems the safest for your back muscles, stay with this. If you're okay using your sand, you're going to get a sandbag and then slide that down so the left leg slides down through the footing. And as you access that, I want you to feel the focus of the arch of the lumbar here. So you can kind of feel that bar, right? That lumbar. It's the new bar. And so when we feel that arch pattern, be a little sensitive to the head tilting back. So I'm not privy to pushing my foot farther forward. I want to find a nice level of my belt supporting my head lowering down just a little bit above the blanket. Yep, and then that right leg, there's quite a bit of stimulation through the hamstring, I suspect. Yeah, so your arms are open. You might shrug your shoulders and then lower them back down. You know, they'll tend to slide up, so your work is on reaching wide with the arms. And hoping that you feel this through the leg, and then some interesting awareness through the back muscles into the shoulders. All right, can you lead the focus to feel when the right leg is up, that connectivity into the right side of the spine, and then into the neck. Like the nerve sensation on each of these areas is a little different, right? The leg has a different kind of reaction in your mind at sensation, as does your back, as does your neck. So if you're a little reserved on this pose, then don't use the sandbag. And you can stay with this version with the knee lifted, right, the foot down. That feels kind of good to me, is to have that assignment for my leg today. Yeah, don't push the edge with the tension. Okay, this might still feel like, you know, a good layer of intensity. Now, when you switch the foot that's in the belt, you move the sand, you bring your foot in and up. And then when you change, you'll likely need your hands behind your head. And some of you might not prefer to keep the belt there the whole time anyhow, back behind your head. So those of you that when you switch through to the second side with the left foot up in the belt, you know, anytime you decide to take the belt off the back of your head for a few, you could slide your hands inside the belt, the sides of your head, right? And take it back behind your head for even a little bit of time here and there, just to maintain the hamstring focus, but not the neck focus, right? So you decide if that's better for you at any time, go with that. I just want to show that version of the hands in that steeple position, reaching back. Okay, second side. And you might have to try the sandbag to decide if you want the sandbag or not. I think that's kind of true. Each side has some different responses. The sandbag makes the hamstring stretch a little more intense, right? It does when I push on that right leg, and that stretches farther down, right? That's going to pull the right side of the spine down, and the left side bounces up a bit on the spine, and then it's kind of serving the left hamstring. Okay, so my right foot is the toes are up versus slouching over to the side. I try to keep that. Yeah, there's effort, right? In some of these postural pathways here, there's a little efforting. Okay. And now you might even notice that your bolster is pretty squished right into your shaping after the last, I don't know, 15 minutes or so being pushing onto it. So it might be real familiar to you to be on the bolster and not feel like it's some strange pressure into your pose anymore. I don't know about you, but I left my block at the base. And sometimes you can use it a little bit for this pose, like under the thigh, wherever it ended up, whatever side it was closer to. There's some benefit to that. Okay, now on the second side, maybe you push your foot a little further. You have kind of these habits to try to have enough symmetry from one side to the next. So notice your habit. Now, if I work on pushing into my foot, what happens for me is my right foot tries to rotate out. So keep it simple, even if it's less doing and more receiving. And again, you can go without the sand anytime, bend the knee again, put the foot down, and see if that gives you a little more drift through the calf. Yeah, use the whole shape to work this side of the body. Both sides of the body influence the left hamstring. Breathing. How about some of that? Your own personal oxygen stream here. Okay. Now let's keep that leg up. So I want you to bring the hands to the back of your head. And then as you slide the belt off of the back of your head, you're going to reach your left foot with the belt still. So you kind of push, and then taking that left foot forward, reach for the belt, cross over with the right hand holding the belt together. So each piece is wedged, is thread together. And then the right leg lowers down, and I cross the left leg over to the right. The right leg just stretches down from its hip joint, doesn't go any other direction. But when the left leg goes towards the right side, right, out off of your mat space, you'll get a feel of bending through that left knee a little bit. Just associate with your balance. So the bolster should keep you from kind of, well, for one thing, you won't flip over. Okay. You're not going to get off of the bolster boat here. So you get a feel of that reach of the heel to the right, and it's kind of can be extreme. I can really feel this certainly in my lateral, right, line up here, lateral muscles of the leg. And if you kind of push on them with your fingers, you can really get a feel of that section a little bit tense, okay? Not that that's a joyful thing or a big smile that needs to come from that, but you can feel that working. The right foot, I'm now relaxed on the side of it. I'm no longer trying to keep my toes up. Okay, now bend through the left knee and just get a feel here. Let's bring the right foot up. Let's change the crossover, of course. Left leg down. Left hand takes the belt. Right leg goes to the left. Kind of feel that you reach downstream a little bit with that right leg. Okay, and manage the circulation real deep into that right hip. And you likely will feel different from one to the next as far as the hip is ranging. So good. So get a feel of the waist centered. And it's like your waist twists too, right? The leg crosses over. That's the lower bones. Get a feel of that cranking into improving your circulation from your hip to your back. But then also the ribs are counter spin to the right. So I want my leg going left, my ribs going right, even though it's not a massive appearing change. but energetically, I'm not letting my chest roll to the left. It's open to the ceiling, and the right arm is reaching out to maintain that intensity. Good. Now, as you bring the right knee to bending, and then that kind of helps you just kick out the belt. So as you lift up through both legs, get a ball. If you don't have a ball, use a block. Yeah, use something between the knees. And then as you move the knees side to side with that block or ball between them, I want you to get a feel of now that back musculature stretching. So even though the legs are what's moving, it's actually featuring helping your back out, right? Two legs move around, helps your back get a stretch. So right now we're using the opportunity of being in a reclining, supining pose to do that back movement. Okay, so take a few more moments before we kind of launch ourselves to side sage. Now feel if you can kind of visualize what side sage is before you approach that experience. Feel the knees when they go side to side. Can you feel the sides of the body trying to kind of loosen up these strands? It's tricky when you do a still shape to get the frequency of movement through that area. There's a little bit of it, but use this to move it along. Okay, get a few more moments of this, maybe one or two more crossings. And then once you go, okay, I'm back in the middle again. Push into the block or the ball, just squeeze into that. Really strengthen to the hips. And then just take a moment when you remove that ball or block, and we'll roll our weight, our legs go to the left. And I want you to actually get your arms to go left too, and then reach the feet down, and then scoot into that bolster. Now you might still have that block stuck. It's kind of funny. The block is stuck. Move it back behind you near your blankets. And then let's take on a shape where we're onto our left hip. So you're going to reach for your blankets. Some of you probably were down to the one blanket, so you stack on the second. Yeah, and then let's get our block overhead. And our blankets are, yeah, mine are probably mushed down enough now that they're a little bit lower than the height of my bolster. So if you feel like you want a little higher blanket, you can add a towel. You have your whole home of props to go look through. You probably can find another towel or blanket if you like. But let's get our right leg stretching back. So I've got a ball on the inside of the right leg, and I got my sand. Okay, so get a sandbag for the external right side, right? And having something to the outer hip might be helpful, and it might be too much some days. So if you decide to go without the sand, perfect. If you're going to add it, it could be hip, it could be ribs, but it could also be in this kind of waist dip here. So you might like that. I find if I put my sand here, it kind of cranks on my back, or it hurts my back a bit. So I either have to be at the base of the position, with the hip itself, or to my ribs. All right. So the nice thing about having your sand at that hip is that you can let the arm move a bit during the experience of the side sage. You can have a little more free range. Okay, once you get sand here, you're sort of stuck. Okay, that's an illusion, you're stuck in it, but you can get out anytime. So find a block or something to put that right hand on, whether it's the bolster, whether it's in space, or it's on a block or a stool or a chair. Yeah, and sample the sensation of that left knee. Even if you don't really identify with your sensation of a knee. It's like usually what's around the knee is what you feel. But you can feel that left thigh moving towards the bolster. And that's going to help position the left side of the spine, right? To feel it's lengthening just a little bit. And then as you merge your focus in here, you might close your eyes. Sometimes when that happens, you can sense where you need to make movement or some shifting in the pose. Right? Not until you're kind of in a quieting internal space. Like, oh, my left side is jammed up or my right side is feeling tense. So you might wiggle yourself so you're a little more on the side, because I'm a little bit turned back. You might want to be a little bit right to that left armpit chest, feeling the bolster, and your head turned down towards the blanket. Okay, or the hand is lower, the right hand, so you choose. Your block height can shift you. Usually the higher up, the easier in the shoulder joint. The farther down you start to kind of grip around the rotator, one of the rotator cuff muscles. Okay, a few breaths here, settling, kind of stirring up through the sides. Good job, and just feel where the ribs expand. And then come back to their centering, but a little more hydrated, kind of plumped up space. Great. Okay, now I like to do patterns, at least today, that are kind of full body, right? So rather than kind of dissect areas spatially, I want to get us to find some expansiveness. Okay, so when you start to come out, this one I want us to actually turn, so you get your sand away, you'll move that right knee towards the left leg, and then as you turn, kind of, you're taking the thread of the left arm, it's like a thread, you slide that back to the hand to the floor. I think this cueing is so. And then you're going to turn so that you're facing towards your bolster, okay? And if you need a blankie under your knee, then take one of your blankets to put under your knees. Otherwise, you're going to stack up your bolster on your blankets. And then you got this kind of full reach for the center body, okay? I find that I'm okay without the blanket under my knees, but not everyone will be. So be sure to use something under your knees if you need to. Now stretch back so it's more full body. Your hands are on the bolster, it's up, it's lifted, right? So you're increasing that circulation all the way through this rib space and shoulder space. So when I lower down my head between my arms, there's only so far I can go. It's not going to be the floor. So I want you to kind of create this openness here in the center and let your head shift, but not drop it down. So this is not what we do. We have it in between the arms, strengthening into your back. Now keep the bolster up and lower the hands down next to the blankets, closer towards your knees than the other side of the bolster. So palms spreading out. Hook the toes under, so they curl under, and then lift up the knees and see if you can just get that lift of your hips and then your head. Well, this is easier because the head goes just straight on down. Okay, maybe you let your head nod side to side. Spread out the fingers. This is key, from the thumb to the index. The thumb to the pinky. Thumb to the index won't do you much good, but that span and that webbing is usually a little bit tripped up for this position. Come back down, come back with the hands on the bolster. Now this is easier for that webbing of the thumb and the index, actually, because it doesn't have as much stress. So the fingers can kind of curl over the bolster a little bit. and then let your head be centered. If it is dunking down a little bit, that's okay. You don't have to put any holder on your neck, but get a feel of the spine stretching back. It should feel like it's a little work to do this. Okay, now when we come back, we're going to slide the bolster off the blankets. We're going to set up for our side stage with the right leg to the bolster. So I'm turning away from that last version. And when you take the side, if your legs feel kind of cuddled up like a fetal position, you might start with that. But again, if you're using the ball, you can't really start like that because you have to somehow be on the side and getting that positional. But when I lie into this right side, yeah, I find I go either down into the rib, the slots between the ribs, or I turn to the left on this side. So I've got to find what is going to be a balance for my ribs, not so much my hips. They're already kind of set in stone here. So when you lower down your head, then you reach that left arm, and it could be open towards the ceiling, the chest it is. It could be resting on the bolster, and then also overhead to the block. Yep, and you might find that that block assignment is great for a few moments, and then you want to change it up. So I really encourage you to explore the breathing motions here, even if they're so kind of tightened, right? It's like this is a very tensified shape for your breath. It's like you can feel the pull of the inhale, then the exhale is sort of challenged to go as long as the inhale because of how the ribs are articulated, how the lung force is. So, you know, anytime you get kind of bored in a practice, this is a good focus, is the breathing, the pace of the breath. So your work is on regulating the breath. Make sure you're doing that you inhale for at least the same amount as the exhale. And then for restorative, the exhale lengthens to calm the nervous system. Some poses easier than others. This one not easy, because you're working on the costal breathing, the intercostals. They're so pulled apart. Okay, so give a few more moments here. If you want to roll the back of your head a little bit, that's okay. But if you've been doing it this way for a long time, it does start to get a little bit more cozy on my neck when I'm this way, but you might still want to go to the side and kind of feel that as well, being on the side of your head. Okay, so get a few more moments here. Okay, now as you come out, we're going to move into feeling our seated body for a few moments, okay? So I want you to let the sand slough off, be kind of sandless for a bit here. And then when you bring the left knee to the right, this time our positional kind of assignment is going to be to go up towards seated, you know, not back to the back of the mat space. So you're going to roll into the right side, and then just take your bolster, push it a little bit over to the side, and then get your blankets. So they're going to kind of be your bolster right now. So you're going to sit on top of the tube, and we're going to do a short set before we go to the wall. So that'll come sooner than you're used to today. But I want you to use the two blankets. If you find that you're really mobile and your knees touch the ground, well, I suppose you could use one blanket, but I'm going to go with two because it's just easier on the low back. So I'm going to sit on my two blankets. I'm going to bend through the left knee. So that left knee is popped up a bit for me. So I'm going to put either, you know, a sandbag or a ball The block might work out good too under your left knee. If your knee touches down and that left thigh feels comfortable and you can do the stretch that deep, then you can. You're already ready for that. Just kind of depends on how you feel without a sandbag on the leg. Some of us need that sand to get the leg down. Okay, so get a bolster. Yes, you don't want to put it too far off to the side. And let that right leg come back so it moves open. So it's about 2 o'clock on the right side. And as your bolster is kind of tipped up, the spine might find this roundedness occurs pretty rapidly. Like roundedness happens, right, in this lower chunk of the body too. So I want you to get that bolster to support you. So you're working with this as kind of an anchor for your sitting bones here and the bolster in the front here. And then get a feel, just your spine. I don't want you to tip forward quite yet. So get the bolster close enough, like it's kind of like you're about ready to give it a hug. And it's supposed to help you get your spine to a tall level. Yeah, if this is like too short for you, you can put your block under your bolster and give yourself a little more height. Okay, so let the spine center, closing your eyes doesn't necessarily make your spine center more, that's for certain, but it might bring you into the internal space better for your breath. Okay, so feel the spine is naturally arched here. So now the key would be to tilt forward from the hinge of your hips and try to maintain that length in your spine. So I'd rather have that you feel, if you put your knuckles to your back, that there's a little bit more arch and a little bit more strength back here than there is this kind of floppy roundedness. So just try for that. You don't need to lean far forward, but if you do want to go farther to stretch more intensely, you could scoot your bolster farther out. Okay, so give this a try. Now add on. So we're going to slide the right foot in so it crosses, and you're in a simple cross-legged position now, Sukhasana. Okay, so my right foot is forward, my right knee bends out, so it's in front of the left shin. And for some of us, it might be farther over, towards in front of the knee. For me, I'm going to have it just right in front of the shin. It's got some space between, probably enough space for a block. So I lean forward to feel into that right hip. Okay, if you start to round so the head goes down, a little different than if you're pushing your spine back. So do as little of that spine pushing back as possible. You should feel pretty sturdy with your arms. Good. Yay, spine strong there. Okay. Yeah, so the bolster is an interesting kind of awareness for our back muscles here. It's like this resistance pattern, because you're pushing into something and then it's holding up the sides of the spine. Okay. So now it'll be pretty simple. We're going to keep working with this bolster a few more moments. So we come back center, take the left leg straight out, bring the right foot in, shift your hips maybe, okay, ball under the right knee for some of us, maybe no ball. And then I have this reach. Now this side will go a little faster on because you have had this circulation in your back going for a while. So now when you bring that left foot in, cross it in the midline. So simple cross-legged. If you don't like the ball, you can get rid of that. Yep. I like it either underneath one or the other leg to just kind of feel my balance. Yeah, you can always move it over to the left knee too. Not sure which one I feel better with. Okay, so lean forward, maintain that natural spinal strength. So if we're going forward with this practice, it's going to be a little bit about some strengthening. Okay, so tilting. Okay, now noticing if the neck tends to kind of pour forward. You want to keep the spine extended. Doesn't mean you can't move your head down between your arms though. Okay, so get a few more moments. If you don't feel much in your hip, that's okay. If you feel more, it is a bit of an irritability producing pose because you're trying to work on sustaining that spine strength, lift in the mid back. Okay, come back through to the center. Good work. And then we're going to move to a wall space. Okay, so let's work with this. I don't want us to do too much flexibility patterns right this second. So let's take our bolster. We're going to go to a wall. If you're close to the wall, you can just kind of keep your props all in a stack. But I want you to uncross, and you're going to turn so that when your feet are at the wall, and kind of so give everybody a few moments to get to their wall space. The only prop you don't really need coming up to the end is going to be your belt. So that's, I think you're going to definitely not need a belt. So you can push that aside, but your other props might be helpful, okay? Especially your blocks. Not too many blankets. Okay, so put a blanket under your knees. I don't want your blanket too unfolded here. You want to have a pretty good fold so when you step into it, you're not going to fumble over your blanket. Have your blocks so they're close enough for reaching and using, getting a hold of them in a while. And then I want you to let your feet touch too. If you've got a little baseboard, that'll be kind of nice to have. So your toes are hooked under, and you're going to work into cat pose. So feel the arms in their natural kind of slope out of the shoulders into the hands, and let your hands move as far away as you like to get that cat stretch. Okay. Now the hands are going to move out to the very edge of your sticky mat, and you're going to let your spine move forward, extend it into up dog. So lift up. Your hands could turn out all the way if you prefer. Arch the spine. Inhale. And then come back to table. And I want you to round the back into that cat shape. Good. Again, so your chin towards your chest. Inhale forward. We're going at a pretty good pace, but I want you to go slower if you need to. So if this is picking up the pace too rapidly, then slow it down. So rounding into cat, and then reaching and extending into up dog. Okay, so feel how those two motions are through your hips. Your feet are basically stepped out right behind you. And then as you come back to table, let's go ahead and bring the hands in a little closer. Let's get our bolster actually. So put your bolster down. You might use it for this dog pose. It does depend, doesn't it? Dog dependent. So when I lift up my hips and I lower down, I'm eventually trying to get my head towards the bolster, right? So it's an inversion that way. You're touching down. Now, if that doesn't happen, you can add a blanket, and you can roll the blanket up like this high, so your head does touch down. So you can use a blanket or a block underneath the blanket and the bolster, but you're going to try to work your way. So your heels could be up at the wall. They could be up. They could be down. That might be just cramp your style a bit. So get a feel of the lift of the hips behind, of course. Hips don't really lift forward, do they? And then as your hands push the floor away, get the feel of the shoulders, the feel of the legs. And now if your heels are up at the wall, I want you to lower the heels down and walk your hands back towards your feet, and you're going to be kind of stuck against the wall, like, oh, now it's stopped. I can't even go farther back. This is it. Okay, so feel how the wall is kind of pushing you into the shape. And I want you to go ahead and reach your hands to that bolster if you can, so that you don't pitch yourself off of balance here. And take a position of really feeling your feet push down and feel your hips push back, and probably you're meeting the wall somehow. You've met the wall. Of course, if it's completely uncomfortable for you to be in this deep of a stretch, you can scoot your blanket forward and your feet forward. And so you're not as directly in contact with body towards the wall. You have space between your leg and the wall. So you decide, okay, how close you want to be with that. It's an unusual design of the shape intensity, so I would go for it and just try. If your legs are hyperextending, of course, micro bend your knees. If it feels harsh on the knee, just bend a little bit. So look at your feet, right? See if they're parallel or if the legs are in more of a shaky position. If so, bring your feet a little bit away from the wall. And then it's tricky. You're going to lower your hands back down. Be careful of your wrists so you really feel through the hand to touch down. And then scoot the heels back to the wall to that downward dog. Okay. Now walk your hands forward. So you're walking front with the hands. So now you're really working on all fours. And lift up the right leg up the wall. So if you got a little space at the wall, just be careful if you got any paintings up there or to the left or the right. So you're going to bring that right foot up the wall to work on that left leg strength into the left hip. Okay, you might be touching the blanket here with the head. That's okay. Change sides, right foot down. Heel could be a little bit up at the wall. That's fine. And then left leg goes up. Yeah, part of it is certainly the possibilities of strength, balance, right? Working into the bone. Breathing helps. It's helpful. Getting out is helpful too. So lower down the left foot and then lower down your knees. Okay. And if you've got this added blanket, I would just leave it on, but I would lengthen it out on the bolster so you have the full blanket, the full height that would be, and it's even. And you lower down onto the bolster. Oh, this feels cozy. Elbows down. Yeah, this might be a little challenging if the blanket is on there, it might feel like you have something stuffed in, which is true. But if you want to use that as making your Sphinx pose a little easier, right, you can use the blanket. So it kind of holds me up. I don't have to do much. So my shoulders are shrugging back, my feet are at the wall, so I work with the bone circulation. If one of your heels pushes deeper than the other, if you can even get your heels to touch the wall, see if you can balance that strength from the sitting bone to the heel bone. Okay, and then slide the hands back. So the elbows are by the sides, but you can feel your shoulders tip down. So your work is on shoulders back, and then push into your feet and see if you can lift up. Good. Now go slow, and perhaps that lift is partial, but you might feel like you can get the full deal here by pushing your feet into the wall. Yep, you don't want your feet up the wall, like high up the wall. You just want your feet are on the floor, pushing into the wall. Yeah, I find that this is so much easier on my back when I have my feet at the wall for this kind of pose. So much easier. So use the wall as that strength cycle into your leg and your hip, the back of your hips. Here, this is where you get a nice amount of support from this position. All right, so lengthen the front of the waist down. Try to go slow. These are our back strengthener, bone density poses, right? Locust pose is a big one, baby back bends. So we'll take one more time. So push into your feet. If your knees bounce up a little bit, that's okay. Shoulders back, shoulders back. They always have to be reminded and then come up. Okay, so lift up the chest, push into the hands. If your wrists are really getting tired from this one, you can do a couple things, right? You can work with the hands to move the fingers to turn out, right? So I turn my fingers out versus the fingers forward. That might be quite helpful for your wrist, right? So the key would be the spine strength. All right, so come down. Bring the fingers to help you press to come up to table. And then let's take a couple lunges. So I want you to choose if you want to use your bolster or not for these. Okay, so if you like a bolster like under your thigh when you lunge, like this kind of thing where you can kind of lean into the bolster, you can take that. I'm going to prefer on this one to have my blocks, just the blocks. Okay, so I can just work on the bone strength. So here's where we'll go with it. Have your blocks, you're using the bolster in the center and you'd be stepping onto the side with your foot. Those of us with blocks, have them pretty high. Take a step forward with your right foot. Okay, and then when you lean into your foot, into the bones, see if you can let the back foot push so you lift the knee up. Now, if you need to scoot around a little bit so the heel is lower at the wall, that's fine. You might not want it completely flattening your foot to the wall. But if I have my foot, more of my foot to the wall, it's just not a real easy way to lunge here. I kind of get stuck. So I lower my heel down, still tilted up the wall a little bit. And then measure the motion of that right knee so it's about above the ankle. But you want to feel that it's enough forward that it supports your knee, right? So I don't want it too far back here. That's not necessarily good. And then trying to move my knee just above the ankle. Good. So keep that and use the wall. Now, if you need a little bit more support with balance to come up, what you might use is your hands on your leg. Okay. So you can come up with your hands on the leg, then you lift up to that lunge, right? You can also have your hands go out to come up to the lunge, but get a feel for how you neutralize your spine. So most of us will tend to really push into our back arch here to try to get this whole pattern in the back muscles to hold our ribs up. So I want you to work with either your hands on your thighs, or your thigh, not your thighs. This is probably helpful, hands onto the leg. And then just feel this natural pressure of motion in the ribs to hold the shape. You kind of have to breathe on this one, huh? It's not like you will wait. Okay, so stabilize good through that right thigh. See if you can take care that when you go forward with your waistline to go down to start to move out, that you maintain this reach of the knee right forward. Okay, now step the left foot to the right foot and take a moment where you put the block between the knees. So you have to step your feet a little bit apart. You can still face forward. Put the block between so it's narrow. And then maintain, you have just this hinge. So nothing more than the hinge. And then bring the arms open. Just open out to the side. Hold on to that block pelvic floor work. Manage the circulation. Getting towards the reach of the hips back. Inhale. And exhale, arms go forward. If you can see a little bit, my arms are just from my shoulder blades forward. So the blades open up, the back blades. And then bring the hands to the block and then take it down to the floor beside your foot. And then take the right foot, step it back. Don't think too much about it or you'll probably walk away from the practice. It's only one more side. And then we're on our back. So not quite yet, but keep that lunge with the left leg. You're either behind the ankle height or you're just on top of it. So you can be both. You can try pushing the leg a little bit back if that is preferred for you. Just don't go over the toes. Okay. Now, if I have the knee above and I start to push from my right foot at the wall, then I can start to access this undercarriage of the left leg. So if this undercarriage is sort of stretching but not really activating, you know what'll happen if you take your hands off your blocks, like the leg carriage will kind of stiffen up, right? It'll get into gear. So when you get away from slouching, you might have to scoot your left foot farther back to help you come up, but I want you to really use that wall behind you to help your strength kind of work into the muscles here. So if you move out with your arms, if you have your hands on your left thigh, that's fine. If you want to bring your hands to your hips, but be very cautious of the knees on both sides, right? The right knee also. You might even notice your back knee is trying to turn in to keep your balance. So you want to keep it just simple, just a knee reaching down from the hip. That's it. And if any of these are too much, you can always be down on your blanket with your right knee and still work the lunge. Right? You could be here and here. That could be fine here today. So just kind of adding a step into Monday, I guess, getting going. So feel the arch in the back and then come down, lower the hands from the leg to the blocks to the knee. If you were on your bolster that whole time, it was probably easier. But anyhow, we come down through our lunge, and this time we'll bring the left foot back and we'll come down to our back. So pivot. In fact, go ahead and turn to the back body and take a blanket to the back of your mat. And I want you to pivot so that your feet are up at the wall. Oh, kind of nice to get away from that other perspective. So feet go up and a block goes between the knees, not so much the feet. So I'm feeling that was a big block, but there's two of them. Okay, get both of your blocks. Okay, let's think block oriented here. My block is narrow between my knees. It's the lowest setting. As if it's a button you push, the lowest setting. All right, so as I have my feet at the wall, my focal point right now is going to be my spine. So wherever your hands feel comfortable, maybe they're down beside your hips. Maybe you want to get that blanket in a little closer. And I know some of you don't like to use the blanket under your head for these types of poses. So you need to be the decider. But once you push into your feet, you can feel the relationship into your spine and that imprint of the spine on the ground. Okay, so push into your feet and then lift up your hips. And if you lift up your hips and your head tends to kind of push up, or you feel all the way to the brainstem tightening, then I would push the blanket that's under your head a little bit back or go without it. But if your head doesn't naturally lift up, you don't need to remove it. Lift up your hips and then arms down by the sides. Take a few moments, make sure your head is relaxed back, and then lower your spine down. Okay. Now, once your spine center, inhale and exhale. Okay, remove the block. We're going to use this under the spine in a few moments, under the tailbone area. So not totally spine, but we'll go total spine now. So you're going to lift up the hips, the arms go back overhead. Yeah, take caution with the blanket. If it doesn't feel right, get rid of it. If you feel jamming up in the neck, it will still be a little interesting without the blanket though too, right? Because that whole spatial connection, I want you to feel like that part of your body, that neck area, is sort of like the branch at the base of your spine, as far as its ability to arch and round. Kind of interesting. So push into your feet, lift up the hips, stretch the arms, or just move them overhead. They don't have to actively push anything. And massage through the spine. It's really strong through the legs here. Okay, take it 2 more times with motion. If you're uncertain about the blanket under your head, you can always try to have the blanket really, really flat, so it's a little lower than it was initially. That might do it for you. Okay, last time, but this time we're going to add some help. So I want you to use a block or 2. So get close enough to the wall so you feel as if your feet can easily push in. You don't have to really tighten up your hips to push into the feet. And then as you push, you're going to lift up your hips and then slide the block so you have 3 heights. I know some of you are trying to get into the highest height on this one, and you might be able to accomplish that without too much discomfort. But once it's there, it usually lifts up the spine, right? It really pulls it and inverts it. And it gives you this nice amount of space between the vertebrae. But if that's kind of so-so for you, you can barely get there, even walking up the wall. You can also take your 2 blocks on the side, so they're at that center height, second height, put them together, make sure that they are together, and then lower your spine down. Just be careful you're not too high up on the back with the block, okay? So then we lower the feet down, unless you like to keep them up. And if you like to keep them up and you want to bring the legs up, you can do this as well. So you have a few versions. You can have one block, the legs up, or the feet up the wall, or the feet down, right? Or you can have the two blocks, the feet up the wall, or the feet down, or the feet up, right? Yeah, I find getting the block up, this is the only approach I can work with where it feels comfortable for my lumbar spine. It doesn't work in the middle of the room without the wall for me to feel like I don't get that support from the lift of the wall. So now if you have your feet down, you're able to open up the hip flexors, the quads, but also the psoas. And let the arms be reaching down. Open the chest, shoulders down, and head. And this can be a really useful position for strengthening the spine. So be patient with yourself in the final spiral here. Do not let your head nod side to side. Be careful here for the neck. It's getting a nice stretch. Lengthen the inhale. Relax on the out breath. Okay, now bring your feet back up to the wall if they're already there, or your feet are up in the air. Then you'll want to bring your feet back to the wall, right? So we'll all end up with our feet up to the wall with the knees bending. And then push into the feet just enough that you can lift up the hips and slide the block out. And let the spine lower down. Right, so really getting that circulation deep to the spine. Okay, now we're going to slide the feet down and then push the blanket back if you have that and slide yourself back. Okay, so let the right leg stretch down so that foot pushes into the wall and the right leg is pretty much straight. Make sure your blanket under your head is comfortable now. It might need to go up a notch with height, so roll it up. And then you're going to take that left leg across to the right side on either a bolster. So it might take you a little bit of setup here, actually. So you'll have a bolster on the right side of your mat. And I imagine you have a ball somewhere for some of you and a sandbag. Okay, so get yourself so that the left leg crosses to the bolster. And a sandbag can be on top of the outer left thigh, and or if you prefer your sandbag on your left arm, you could do the right hand could pull and put that sandbag across. Okay, so I know I can't get there to put your sand on for you. Ooh, okay. So as you access that crossover and that layer of movement, is your knee supported? Is your leg supported? So if you need another blanket, you know, something stuffed in under that left knee, you can use a blanket there. Okay. Right knee's now bending, so my lower leg is no longer perfectly straight. I had it lengthened and then it creased into my spine back bend, right? So you have a little back bend in your spine. And then let your arm open. Yeah, you can roll your head to the left. You can have your head back in center. Yeah, your neck has had a good amount of workout today, so you might want to let your head roll a little to that left side. Yeah, be sure that the right arm is in a comfortable place. And that lower belly movement. With the breath, slowly. Now you might feel that the left leg is a little high. When you cross it over, you might notice if you kind of slide it a little downwards, it kind of pulses into the hip different. So I want you to get as much circulation that's through the side layer of the leg. Even if you have to put your right hand onto that sandbag. And I can feel that in front of my left armpit chest. And into the ribs. You take a few more moments to stretch the hip, the breathing muscles. And then slide your sand away. And you're going to get ready for that second side. And in between the two sides, you might want to bring your knees to your chest a little bit, but don't snap them in too close so your spine doesn't get shocked here. I mean, the sacrum doesn't get shocked. So you might want to just step the feet and feel the knees bending there and feel that natural motion of the spine pressing down. So evening out the back. That can be quite helpful. It's just the most simple, elementary experience. Like your body's getting reset. And then place the bolster to the left side of your mat and scoot yourself so that the left leg goes down. I like to actually get my leg close enough that I have to push back to create length in that left side of my spine. And then as I roll my right leg over to the bolster, then my left knee bends. But it's nice to kind of establish that anchor and touch and then cross over. Okay, so a ball can be helpful for some at the sacrum. It kind of nudges in, it becomes an anchor for the pelvis. And then we use that sand for some on the outer right leg. If you have a sandbag, use it. If you decide not, perfectly fine. And as you establish that connection of the sand support and the rotation, then open out the right arm and roll your head gently to the right. Right, try to go with that side of the spine's kind of assignment on the right side. And just feel how the waist is in rotation. Right, there's not all parts of the waist turning. It might be feeling like it's the rib area that gets the rotation. That would be the best option of focus, is where you have a natural kind of rotunda right here in the middle that motions when asked to. And if your head goes back to center and that's where it's meant to be, that's fine. And get a few more moments here. Let that hip stretch. Let the back of the hip loosen up and open. And now with this kind of reflection of awareness for both hips, even though your left hip is in the past that it was worked on, now we're going to get both of the hips up. Okay, so I want you to move any ball that you have away, and also the sand keeps nearby. And when you roll to that left side, We're going to roll in to the left, over to the left, come up with your hands helping you, and then use your bolster up to the wall at the base. And I would go just one bolster height, not adding a blanket today, because we just did these 2 hip crossovers and not a lot of knees to chest, okay? At least the last half hour or so. So you're going to sit up to the wall. You got your blanket. If you want your other blanket to put over you, if you're chilly, that's a good idea. But once you roll the shoulder under and let the legs swing up the wall, you're going to find where that rotation is in the ribs to get there. So I think part of that getting upside down is going to be a little challenging after in the beginning, probably years of doing that, getting your legs upside down in this pose. But after a while, all these abilities, the flexibilities do help you get your legs to swing up. It's not just your legs, your back flexibility, it's your ribs. It's all important. Okay. So once you get your legs up, and I think sometimes when you think about it when you're getting up and you work your ribs to help you twist and swing the legs up is interesting. Difference for me that time I got very close and I didn't fall off the other side. So flexibilities come in all areas of the body, doesn't it? So if you want to have any blanket or if you have other sand, you can put them in your core. But otherwise you could put your blanket in the mid body. I feel like I wish I had like a whole thing I could step into. That would keep me super warm. If you have an eye pillow, put that over the closed eyelids. And if you find that you're comfortable just here without any hardware on your face, and then remove the motion of trying to push the hips down. Just get a feeling of what's lifted, right, naturally. And sometimes your perspective changes when you enter the pose, and it's easier, and sometimes it's harder just to get upside down. So feel what works for you when your hips press into the bolster, and your hips don't, and you put more weight into your spine. And feel what is better for you. Weight into the hips, weight into the shoulders. And then arrive at that fluid interchange between in and exhale. So we've kind of come full circle between flexibilities and then fluidity of breath. So first, acknowledging your effort to be in practice. And feel how the shoulders motion back. Feeling the heart open. And if the abdomen is felt moving, right in the center of the waist, not so much the lower belly, your focus is really to get that motion of the belly body to really get a feeling even to the lowest part of the abdomen. It's usually a pretty dormant area. And it might be kind of sleepy area of the body to mobilize and strengthen the lower belly. But just being upside down strengthens it, right? Because the forces of gravity make it so you're not dropping in that area right now. You're not prolapsing. Maybe you're elapsing. Relaxing the eyes, the breath. Let's take the deepest inhale, fill the belly, notice that lowest part of the abdomen moving, or just sensing that you're filling up near it. And then exhale, empty, and feel the abdomen move back towards the floor. Now, if you happen to have the sand on your feet, let's bend the knees and then flow the knees towards your chest and then move the sand. You can either fling it to the back or remove it. And then bring your feet to Badakanasana at the wall so that your feet are together, the knees are out, and you can emphasize that experience of the hips kind of float up a little bit when you let your knees move out. Right? They're a little more grounded when the legs are up, and then when the knees move out, there's just a little titch of lift in the hip bone. I know. The more you practice, the more little things that you'll catch on to with your inner body, but why not? Why not learn a little more about the self in motion and stillness? So the hands could push the legs, so they have directional kind of breadth. Yeah, and we'll try to keep this balance when we sit up. So you've got to move your knees another direction to get yourself wound to sit up. But as you move your knees in, take your time. Remove that blankie if you have that, roll to the side. And I want you to be at the wall with your back to the wall. So your hips are back to the wall, the knees are moving open, and the body is in more of that cross-legged centered position. But even if the feet are not pushing together, you can still feel the knees flow up and the hips center down. The lower abdomen is now in the opposite direction. So it's a little different way to control it, isn't it? It's just kind of drops. So feel that assignment of the shoulders centered back and bring your hands up to the heart. Let the spine center in, and as your head bows down to your hands, moment, feeling the awareness of practice inside you and those sharing your practice today. Inhale, breathing in wellness. Exhale, bowing into your heart.